Yeah. So Caden is not around for the moment.
No, no, it looks like he's under the weather today. So yeah,
Okay.
hope he's doing well.
And I saw a message from somebody else who was going for COVID test.
I think that was Caden.
Who was that?
Yeah. His handle is eating555.
Oh, I thought it
Yeah.
was somebody else. Oh, okay. I guess he will be feeling better next week then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he does have a YouTube channel. So he subscribed to the historical modeling YouTube channel, and so I followed up on that. And he's a maker. So uh, he tinkers with electronics, Arduinos. He uploads his videos of his projects. So I've got a friend who's also a maker, Harold Pulcher. He does a Twitch
Yeah.
stream. So I'll connect the two and see if they've got some stuff in common that they can work on
Yeah,
together.
he's doing electronics.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, electronics. I should have time for it.
Yeah, I've held a soldering iron in my day and didn't burn my fingers. So, um, but yeah, I tend to be more on the more on the theoretical side, and you know, electronics is very practical, very hands-on, very messy. um,
It is it is very handsome, but the underlying theory is pure math.
yep. Yeah, that's the part that I love about it. I was talking with a friend about how you can model a circuit with an equation and then solve the equation and predict what the circuit's going to do. But then when you go and build that circuit and you buy the parts that match the numbers that you put in, it does something different. It's because there's like a 10% tolerance on a lot of these parts, and it's like, oh, that's that's a really broad range of error there.
Yeah, but in general, it does, or it used to work. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's a long time ago. My background is in fact electronics,
Oh.
so I went from the electronics to the computers to the programming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was when I was 10 years old, I was fascinated by it. There was no internet, so I read all the books in the library. I didn't understand it, and so later on, I went for studies. Um, but yeah, then I still have a scope here in my
Mm.
office, which has been which has not been on for years.
Uh-huh.
A multimeter, yes, I do use it.
Yeah.
No, but
Yeah,
if
that's just a
you,
useful tool to have around the house.
yeah,
Yeah.
but for example, if you go to high frequencies,
Mm.
everything that has to do with high frequencies, antennas,
Yeah.
um, simulation of antennas is pure maths.
Yeah.
Even everything with transmission cables, standing waves in transmission cables, all these things
Mm-hmm.
is pure math. So
Yeah.
Fourier transforms.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah,
Beautiful
it's
stuff.
very nice. So
Cool. Well, I do
okay,
have a really hard stop, so we'll make this one a little bit shorter than usual.
okay. So we'll forget about electronics today. We will start
Yeah.
with historical modeling.
Yes.
No, last time the Gitk,
Mm-hmm.
it showed always modified files, but in fact it doesn't matter. I wanted to use it just to visualize, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what it does. It shows modified files, but there are no files modified, but that doesn't really matter. So it's still useful to
Okay.
use Gitk.
And actually, I
Then
thought of another thing that you could do if you wanted to make that more useful. So Git the .git attributes file lets you specify how to handle line endings, and so by default it's going to convert line endings to your appropriate um, operating system. But you can say just treat everything as binary, and then it won't do any of that. And then even with the mounted drive, Gitk should show you only the meaningful differences.
well, I thought that it was about the line endings. because Windows and Linux are different there, but it seems to be the locking of the files, the security.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. We did talk about that.
And also
Yeah.
for that, there is a parameter that you can set in Git in the config files.
Oh, okay.
But I tried a few combinations and it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
So
yeah. You did show me some of those. Yeah.
then I said, okay, wasted enough time on it. So, okay. But then more interesting and more stupid from my side, the database access.
Ah,
Remember
yes.
we were looking to this PG_HBA file. I've been reading a little bit about it to try to understand what it does. In the end, in my case, no need to change it. The only thing I did wrong was I created, so automatically when you install Postgres, there is a Postgres user created, an Ubuntu user created, and you have a database user created. I set a password on the Ubuntu user. I didn't set a password on the Postgres user.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that means that you can log in PSQL because it's using this peer authentication from the Ubuntu system.
Right.
So
Yes.
from Ubuntu, you type PSQL and it will connect automatically to the Postgres database because it's using that local peer authentication. But if you use pgadmin from Windows,
Right.
then it's going to use the MD5 authentication. And so you need to set a password.
Okay.
So by not only setting a password on the Ubuntu user, but also on the Postgres user, the problem is fixed.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was just a stupid mistake because that was my first time really looking into how does Postgres work. Then I discovered that it has a WAL file, WAL file, write ahead logging.
I didn't know Postgres supported that.
In the internal structure of Postgres, it does call it a WAL file, just like SQLite, which it is using for concurrency.
Okay.
It,
Yeah, I don't remember seeing any way to turn the wall mode on and off. So is it just internal?
I don't think you can turn it off.
Okay.
I guess I didn't look that deep into it. I just looked a little bit into roles, users, groups, schemas to discover that the groups and the users and the role, it's all the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
These days. But it's so. Then one that was more difficult, or that made me waste more time. So once everything was installed, I discovered that I have a virtual machine, Windows 10 virtual machine. On that virtual machine, I activate WSL2, in which I install Ubuntu. To install Ubuntu, you have to set something like forward the virtualization, so that in that virtual machine, it supports virtualization for Ubuntu.
Okay, right, right. Yeah.
I don't remember the correct settings. But then when I opened 2 Linux terminals and 2 VS Code sessions with Jinaga and the shared list, it became extremely slow. I set up the virtual machine just like I did before with dynamic memory. So virtual machine, you can say dynamic memory. That means you give it a lower bound, an upper bound, 1 giga memory, 4 giga RAM memory as upper bound, and start with 2 giga, for example. And the virtual machine will automatically adjust according to its needs. Turns out that virtual machine didn't want to adjust the memory, so it stayed on 2 gigabyte all the time. And the machine was asking for a lot more, so it really, even with an SSD underneath, it was swapping all the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So It's even documented, but you have to know where. So before I found that, I started rebuilding the virtual machine, and I discovered at the moment that when you enable WSL2, it's still working, but from the moment that you install Ubuntu, you have problems. And wait, let me copy that link. What was it that Microsoft said about it?
So this is Ubuntu running inside of WSL2 inside of a virtual machine.
Yeah, wait, let me, dynamic memory and runtime memory sizes. Was it this one? When Hyper-V is running inside a virtual machine. Yeah? So that's even when you run Docker inside a virtual machine, I assume.
I think
The
so.
virtual machine must be turned off to adjust its memory. This means that even if dynamic memory is enabled, the amount of memory will not fluctuate. So for virtual machines without dynamic memory enabled, any attempt to adjust the amount of memory while it's on will fail.
Okay,
So
so it's the virtual machine, the Hyper-V virtual machine is trying to adjust its memory, and the VM that it's running in isn't going to be able to allocate any more memory, so it fails.
Also, so you have your host, you have a virtual machine on top, and that virtual machine is giving the Hyper-V service to WSL or Docker or whatever you
Right,
put.
right,
So
okay.
in fact, a virtual machine inside a virtual machine. And so for the original virtual machine, the original, you say
Yeah.
dynamic memory, and it doesn't work.
Right, okay.
So that's
Yeah.
documented. But so if you have that problem, because I guess I didn't try Docker, but on that virtual machine, but I guess it will be the same problem.
Yeah, that probably would have been the same problem. Yeah.
So the solution, attribute more memory from the beginning and buy some more RAM for your host.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if Docker Compose might be a solution here. So it does sound so you are running a full virtual machine and then trying to do Docker and WSL2 and everything inside of there. But if on the host you ran
Yeah.
Docker Compose, you could create multiple Docker containers, and then so one of those could be Postgres, and then another one could be a Linux container. It could be Ubuntu, and then you rerun Visual Studio Code on the host and shell into the Ubuntu container.
That should work, I think.
Yeah.
Because, for example, if I would just have a virtual machine with Windows and another virtual machine with Ubuntu, and with my Postgres database, then there should be no problem because the virtual machines are directly on the host.
Yeah. Yeah.
The problem comes from WSL2. WSL is in fact a virtual machine, and because I run that Windows session on a virtual machine, it's a virtual machine inside a virtual machine.
Okay, my understanding of WSL2 was that it was not fully a virtual machine. It might still be using Hyper-V to accomplish some of the things it needs to do, but
one not, two yes, I think, but it was a little bit streamlined to boot up
that might
faster, to have an even better integration.
Yeah, that might be old information.
And to run even on Windows Home, I think you don't need Windows Pro, which you need for Hyper-V. So there were some shortcuts. So okay, but that took a little bit time. Then the color. Okay, yeah. Let me just make that window. Where's my? Well, all these things are not historical modeling. It's all a little bit infrastructure.
All the other stuff.
Yeah. But okay, it starts with infrastructure, and then you can do the rest. Wait, let me share that screen.
Yeah, I think
Where
there's an
is it?
infrastructure curve that is asymptotically approaching um, the line of productivity.
Yeah, at a certain moment
It's
you're,
like I'm almost there. I just need to
you're
keep working on this.
and I always realize that I have a lot of trouble with it. Perhaps I go too much in details. Perhaps, yeah. Um, so okay, this one, the terminal, the colors of the terminal last time. You can see the
Yes.
my screen, yeah.
Yes.
So last time we had this one. We changed
Oh,
the screen background.
yeah.
Remember? So screen
Yeah.
background, and we put it to white. What we can do is just take screen text. Then, for example, here, this one, blue. That blue was initially just 255. Yeah, so if you
Oh,
put it
okay.
this, then it's hardly readable.
Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't
you can see
understand
that.
how this interface worked. I thought that
Yeah.
was a quick color selection,
Mm,
and then here's the fine detail color selection. But that's not what is happening. It's
no,
that
no.
these are the 16 colors that you can
16
program.
colors, and you can program them.
Okay.
So what was it? I think 59 or something, and then 120. You see,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
becomes much more clear. Just press cancel, and then so there you can change the colors, and that's nice.
Yeah. Okay. I thought you
And
had to do that through like your Bash profile or something like that.
no,
I was like,
because
we don't have
this
time
is
for that.
actually because this is just like a command window. This is Windows.
Mm-hmm.
But then the next problem, remember, yeah, where you could see it well was in a file with a lot of CD space. File with a lot of comments. CD PostgreSQL 12. If my memory is well,
It should be
no.
Postgres, not Progress.
Ah, um, I like too much progress.
Yeah.
Um, Postgres. And it was so if we
Yeah, the
we go
CUNF.
VI and then that PG
Um,
H. Not,
yeah, that one was
yeah,
a whole bunch of comments.
yeah. Look,
Yeah,
this is
okay.
much better.
Yeah.
This is much better. And whether you type VI or Vim, it does work. So this was what Caden, I think was his name. Yeah,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
what Caden told us. There is a theme that you can set.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can also just set a color. Yeah. For example, escape column color. What else? Wait. You just do tab. You see all the schemes here.
Oh.
If I would say default, for example, you see,
Oh,
that's
weird.
very bad.
Okay. Yeah. So it's overriding
So,
the terminal's settings from within the
so
shell.
no. So actually, you have the terminal settings, and here we are in Vim itself or VI
In Vim.
itself.
Okay.
And VI is actually not following the color scheme of the terminal, has its own color scheme.
Okay.
So you can just select it here, and the one that was nice was industry. So then you get this, which is quite readable.
Okay.
Now this setting, you will lose it. Yeah. So the solution for that, you have the vim rc.local file.
Mm-hmm.
Either you can just in your working directory, you add right,
Mm-hmm.
in your local directory, you add a .vimrc file, and you add color scheme industry inside that. The problem is that only applicable to you. So the moment that you use a sudo vi, then you're back to the original.
Yeah.
So
Can you put
what
that
you
file
should
in a root as well?
what you can do, there is a local one, a global one. So cd here to the etc vim directory. There you make the vimrc.local file. And you just inside color scheme, not color scheme here, industry.
Oh.
And then it works globally on the machine. So whether you log in as a super user or as
Okay.
the root or any other user, Postgres, it will work.
Okay. I would have completely misunderstood the word local. I would have thought it meant the opposite. But yeah, so you're saying that local is local to the machine. Every user is going to have this default, versus the one that's in your home directory is
Yeah,
used
because
specifically.
so this is etc vim. If you want to change it locally, you have to. So now I'm in my root directory, cd dot to that dot vim. Yeah, there's nothing inside, but you can make a file inside here, and that's only for you.
Okay.
Yeah, in your working directory. So
Okay.
so
Yeah. Thank you.
that's another problem solved.
Yeah, I am so going to change all those defaults. It's I just increase the font, take off my glasses, look at the screen. Yeah, all right, yeah, I can read it now. It's like, yeah, I never bothered to to do all this research to figure out how to fix that.
Yeah, but then I write it down because otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the things that were solved, and then I had a couple of questions because
Okay.
the purpose of all this.
Oh
Wait,
yes, yeah. Let's approach that that line of productivity. Yeah.
the purpose was to clean up these scripts. Yeah, before getting to
Yeah.
historical modeling.
Yeah.
So in these scripts, actually, so we want to separate them, but here you write about a deaf user. And then and here you have your app user. Do you want to have, so you have your super user, you have a dev user, you have an app user. The app user is the one that only has the select and the insert capabilities on the database. So that's really the user that's going to be used by Jinaka, the app
Yeah.
user.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, the dev user I think is just me assigning two different names to the same thing.
Okay. So you don't want to say as a developer, you need rights on the database to create, for example, to modify the tables.
No, I let Postgres the Postgres admin user be that user.
Okay. So in fact, we only need an app user.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then in the README, why actually do you make use? I'm just asking because I never used Bash before. So you do all these exports.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But that means that you have to type every export again, or you have to copy this into a shell file, to a Bash file, but then your passwords are written in a Bash file, and then you're going to check them in,
Yeah.
which is not what we should do.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So why use export for example, for a password?
Yeah. Yeah, the intent here is to show what's necessary in order to run the script. But yeah, it could be a bit more clear about um, best practices, about how I really want you to use this. So, yeah, first of all, the word export is necessary there in this particular example, because without that, it would be set in the shell, but the script would not be able to see that shell
Yeah.
variable. Um,
Hmm.
and um, and so yeah, the export makes that variable live for the entire session, which, yeah, as you point out, is
It's a bridge to the other shell, to the other setup here.
yeah,
Um, Here you use this in that connection string, for example.
right,
Jinaga Postgres admin user and so on.
yeah. So so alternatives would be to change the script to take those variables, and then you just have to type out a really long command line. Um, the way that I envision people using this would, uh, since this is a one-time setup, I could envision somebody interactively working with the shell in order to set the variables, make sure everything is okay, and then execute the script, and then killing that session. Um, and now that the session is gone, the password is no longer stored. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
because for example, you could, in this setup script, you could start by setting some parameters in the beginning, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which are actually these parameters. Localhost is nothing secret. The port is nothing secret. The user not, just for the passwords. And then you could ask the user to type in the password at that moment. Not change the script, but the script could just ask for the password
Mm-hmm.
before creating that, before connecting.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem I see with that is that that means the script has to be used interactively. I mean, I know I just described a way in which it is used interactively, but but it also makes sense to use that, for example, in a Docker a Docker file, which in fact the Docker image does just that. And
Yeah.
so you set you set the parameters for the Docker file um, as environment variables. It gives you defaults, and then you can override whichever ones you want to. Um, so um, so in order to make the script as versatile as possible, I just had it expect those variables to be there. I guess it would be even more versatile if all of those things were parameters, um, and then it's just how you called the script. You could figure out. You say, okay, I'm going to put together a command line that calls the script with a whole bunch of variable names as parameters, and then I can interactively set the variables, make sure everything's okay, and then execute that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of tricky to figure out what's the what are all the scenarios in which somebody's going to use this script. Um, yeah, for
So
production, I want it to be a DBA doing this because it's a one-time thing. Um, but if for example, spinning up multiple instances, and that's actually your application is that it is a multi-tenant and that it spins up a different database for each tenant, then you would want to automate that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and this just documents what you would need to do in order to automate it.
yeah. So actually, the selected portion here, all these exports,
Mm-hmm.
you put them in a separate script then that you run first.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. All right. Um,
yeah. But yeah, that is a tricky one. Um, I often look at instructions that say, okay, just do it this way, and everything works, and the instructions are written from a specific scenario, and uh, um, and so this is my attempt to kind of push back on that. It's like these are, yeah, this is something that would work interactively, um, but it's also documentation for how you would, um, if you figure out, it's your secrets, you figure out how to manage them. Um, So if you're in Kubernetes, are you using Kubernetes secrets? Are you using HashiCorp Vault? To uh, make those available in the right way.
Yeah, but so actually the secrets, you just put them in a separate file so that the main setup files, the main setup scripts, the SQL file and the setup script, we don't have to change them, and we don't have to store secrets inside. That's the purpose. So keep the secrets just in a separate file that we run first.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, we can change this README to document doing that. Um, is that your suggestion? So whereas right now it says
Well,
here, just export all of these variables, but instead expand the documentation a bit to say here, create this file which is all of the um, the
but
stuff that's
we
not
just,
secret, and this file that's all the stuff that is secret.
yeah. But if we just make a new file here, and we copy a new shell, a new bash file, and we copy this line here, yeah, then they can just be executed without typing everything.
Yeah.
So you first run all, and this is then the file that you have to modify. Of course, you have to add your username, your password, but that's a file that you don't check in the public repository.
Right.
And if you want to use it for testing, you can just use the file with a default, with this secret and with this app password. And if you use it in production, you modify this file. Just don't check it in. At least not in the public repository.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that raises the level of abstraction one level, and so it's okay. We recognize that there are some things that are secret. There's some things that are not secret, and we don't know the exact scenario you're going to be running under. So you manage secrets the way that you intend to. But then, assuming that you can get a file here at this particular point in time, then these instructions will work. Okay. Yeah. 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 I think that. Yeah, I think that can work without without obfuscating the intent here. Yeah. Kind of bring in a
I
little
will
bit of abstractness.
try out something. I will try out something in that sense without checking it in, and then you can see it next time
Okay. Yeah.
to see whether it will work or not. And then I think, here. What is the meaning of this one?
That is a strange little quirk in Postgres. So
Does it make a literal string of everything that is between here?
it's something like that. You'll notice that there's a kind of a at the very bottom. I think
Yeah, you
there's
have
a
the same one at the
close.
bottom here.
Yeah,
Here.
and so it's that string basically replaces the end of statement character or the end of statement line. It says, okay, when you see this, we're done. And I think the reason for that is because of all of the individual statements that are in that block, with the semicolons that end all of those conditional statements. If you don't set up a block like that, then you could just run one of them. But I think
you will just run one line.
Then
you will just run the begin, and that's it. Or everything is in a begin end block.
I think it was the conditions. I think that's what caused it to need that extra layer.
You have a little bit the same here with this end of SQL.
Right. Yeah. Which was.
which has actually the same purpose. It groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I
But
can't
that one,
remember if that was for yeah, you know what? I can't remember if that was exactly the same interpreter that was doing it, or if that was the shell that needed that extra bit of help. But yeah, that is one of those strange things. You're tunneling one language through another, and um,
okay, yeah, but at least now I know why it's here.
mm-hmm.
So I will play with it and find out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you'll
Okay.
see different examples online that use different um, characters there. So the example that I pulled from to begin with was just do, but yeah, you'll see people choosing other conventions.
Because this end of SQL, I found it on the internet, but the $do I didn't find it. But okay. And then last question in your last recording from when I was not there.
Mm-hmm.
So you tried to fetch the necessary facts to the client based on the queries that the client has.
Mm-hmm.
But then you said it's all described in the book, but it turns out to be much easier.
Oh yes, yes.
But you never explained why it was much easier.
Oh, I didn't. No. um, yeah. So in the book, and yeah, I know that that here I'm risking revealing the fact that I'm streaming something that's a mirror image. Yeah, whenever I hold up the book like this,
Oh,
and
it's readable.
yeah, it's
It's
readable to
readable.
you, but
Yeah.
everybody watching on YouTube was like, oh, that's not readable. And I discovered that when
Yes.
um, the person that I hired to do, thank you, sir.
Right.
Uh,
Is it
that
readable? No, it's not readable.
it
No, it's
is
not
it is
readable.
to me, and it will be readable on the stream as well.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, funny how the human brain works, and we have to accommodate.
Yeah.
Um, just because we grew up with mirrors. If
Mm.
we had invented computers before mirrors, this wouldn't be a problem. Um, so,
Mhm.
uh, yeah, in the book, so I talk about all these different rules um, for running an algorithm that inverts these.
That was page number 304.
Yes, I'm on 304. So
You
we're
had all these simplifications there.
yeah.
You
So
say in that case, yeah.
yeah, and there's lots of different conditions. So in this case, this is going to work, but in that case, it's not. And basically, this chapter, query inverses. Originally, I was just documenting the proof that I thought I had of the very simple algorithm that's in Janaga, and then as I started documenting the proof, it's like, no, this proof is wrong. There are these cases where that doesn't work, and so the chapter sort of became an exploration of the proof and said, okay, up to this point, it's nice and simple, it works. Oh, but then you've got a negative existential condition that then has a nested condition. It's like, okay, that's not going to work anymore, and here's why. And so there are two places in the chapter where I kind of conclude the proof, and the first one is kind of the simple case, and it concludes with kind of a revelation of what would no longer work, and then launches into exploring that case. Um, so so anyway, all of these extra little conditions about how to handle inverses, and in fact, it turns out to be much simpler if instead of looking at it as a pipeline of steps, if instead you look at it as a graph of traversing the predecessor successor um, uh, uh, links, those arcs, but you can traverse them in either direction. So so you take that graph and then you label certain nodes within the graph. The rule there is that uh, you need to put labels. Excuse me. Need to put labels in the valleys. So so if you have a fact within that graph that is not labeled and it has predecessors that are labeled, then that's incorrect. You need to make sure that that the lowest successors in that graph receive labels. And then furthermore, any fact that begins a condition. So you have an existential, positive or negative from that point. That needs to have a label as well. And I only really discovered this while we were working on the .NET query language, and the syntax of that language kind of forced me into labeling exactly these points. And then once those are labeled, now what you've got is a series of variables, a series of unknowns, and a series of equations. So the equations are the paths from one label to the next, and they are also the inputs. So so if you're doing just a very simple successor join, so the input is the predecessor joined to the successor, so you've labeled the predecessor and the successor, and now the successor is what you're ultimately interested in. And so you're going to get that path, following that arc in the opposite direction of the arrow, and you're going to get to the starting point. So you've got those two equations, and you've got the two unknowns, those two labels. So once you get it down to 0 degrees of freedom, once you get down to as many equations as you have unknowns, then you can execute that graph, as long as it's fully connected and you don't have some of your paths duplicated over here, and then there's a gap and there's a different part of the graph that you can't reach. But assuming that you've fully connected your graph and you've gotten down to 0 degrees of freedom, then you can execute that, and you'll end up with a set of tuples. So now you constrain your tuples according to the existential conditions and to the inputs. And so query inversion just means changing what is an input. So so it really just now I want to invert that very simple query, which I could do mechanically like I did in the book. That one works. In fact, the Janaga algorithm works just fine for that one. So I could do it mechanically, or I could do it by taking that path between the two and the starting point of the predecessor, and just now move the starting point to the successor label. Keep that same path, and now I still have two equations, and I can compute tuples, but now they're the tuples that are constrained to the successor being a certain starting point, and that computes the inverse. So that that way of thinking through this as a system of equations, that generalizes in a way that the mechanical way doesn't.
Okay. I think I will go on one more time through that through that recording. No, because it was a nice recording with the sample of the enrollment in the school.
Yeah.
And with the course offerings. It was very nicely done, but I think I didn't catch it yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
I will go through it again.
That basically makes real the the hand waving that I just did here when I said, take the simple example and it works for the more complicated one. Well, that's the more complicated one. that shows existential conditions, and it shows how you've got different systems of equations as you continue to explore. So yeah, in that one you can see, oh, okay, if I run this and include the existential condition, then I can run it in this direction. But if I want to invert and start from something that is inside of that existential, then I only need to run it up to this point. So it's but what's really cool about that is that thinking about it that way rather than this mechanical way gets you to a place where you can now write an algorithm that turns it back into something mechanical. And so I can just write that algorithm and it computes the correct inverses.
Okay. I think, yeah, no more questions.
Okay.
Stop this sharing.
Yeah, so I think we will go ahead and call it here, so I can get prepared
You
for
had that.
my meeting coming up right at the end of the hour.
Mhm.
And I can tease one thing that I've started researching. There's a tool called Obsidian that is
Obsidian.
that is a note-taking tool that uses Markdown. Um, and
Yeah.
um, and the thing that got me hooked is that it keeps track of links in both directions. So inside of a Markdown file, you can add a link to a different Markdown file. It keeps track of the links in both directions, and with a plugin, gives you a query language that lets you traverse those links. And so,
With the plugin.
yep,
So it's a plugin that exists already.
yes, yeah, that plugin exists already,
Yeah.
and it's a very extensible system, so it's pretty easy to create your own plugins. And so you might
Mhm.
imagine that first of all, I built a historical model in Obsidian, and then
Yeah.
I wrote queries over that historical model using this plugin. But those queries are, as you might imagine, more complicated than they need to be, because the query language doesn't know that it's doing something based on immutability. So it's giving you all of
Yeah.
these extra options that you're not going to use. So since it's a very extensible system, why not create a plugin that does factual queries?
Okay. And that could be used just to try out historical modeling interactively.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason that I'm really excited about giving that a try is that there are some models that I've said, yeah, this would be useful, but I don't want to sit down and write some React and some Janaga code in order to realize this. And then once it's put into React and Janaga code, there's some friction to changing it. You're right there in the application, and you're like, oh, there's this new case that I didn't think of that just happened. How do I represent this case? Well, I have to write that down somewhere, then go into the code, make that change, and then I can come back and record that. But if it's inside of a dynamic system like this, that's getting closer to that dream of the Excel
SQL
user being
Server
able to,
Manager.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So they can say, oh, here's this new case. Let me just record this new document and then
Mm.
modify this query, and now it's handling that new case.
Okay. That would be great.
So I will give you a demo of that next week.
Yeah. I'm first gonna concentrate on that on that Bash script and then on .NET, because otherwise I will
Mm-hmm.
never get there.
Yeah.
Good. Michael, see you next week then.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Thank you
Thank you
very
so much,
much.
Jan.
Until next week.
All right.